Hello and welcome, everyone. If you could hear me okay, please just give me a thumbs up. If you can, awesome, great. We want technology to make us great. My name is Krischanna Roberson. I am glad to be with you this morning. I'm going to go into a little more of an intro, but I want to make sure that I first begin with a land acknowledgement. Because the seminar is being held online with many of us in various areas, a singular land acknowledgement does not capture the richness of the distribution across these locations we each are currently residing on. So with these words, I honor and acknowledge the history and contributions of Indigenous Native peoples in these regions where we each reside. I honor the truth and history that their land was stolen from them. With the destructive forces removing people from their land, I pledge to remain vigilant and engaged in the protection of Native peoples and Native waters. I would like to remember and bring forth the wisdom from 11 Indigenous nations in Georgia and recognize the sustained oppression, land dispossession, and involuntary removals of the Muskogee and Cherokee peoples from Alpharetta, Georgia, where I currently reside. I ask that we each consider your own position in regard to the land where you find yourself, and we just take a moment of silence to pay respect to the elders and ancestors, past, present, and extend our recognition to their descendants. Thank you. And if you currently are not sure what land you're sitting on, I did place a great link in the chat for you to be able to see where you are currently sitting. I'm going to get to all of the fun stuff before we get into it. I have dropped study guide link repeatedly into the chat. It is on the conference site. You'll need that to follow along with what we're going to discuss today. Please keep your camera on as much as possible. I use camera on and off cues. And I also want to see whether or not your facial expressions are telling me that I suck or I'm doing a good job, just like our students do in the classroom. So work with me, friends. Please make sure you update your name and your preferred pronouns. If you have something to say, I want to make sure that I honor and respect your name. I currently use Prezi, and in order to see the content on my screen, if you utilize video or speaker view, you'll be able to see the content. Video is disabled for attendees right now. Joy, is that possible to release? Now it's up? Okay, awesome. And because we've been in this virtual conference all day, and if you're tired of looking at yourself, you can use those 3 ellipses at the top, and you can turn off self-view, but I need to let you know that we can still see you. So if you decide to use that, please make sure you have some pants on. From previous experience, I am naming that. And also, if you're speaking, there will be times where I'll ask for a couple of voices. Don't apologize for life happening, children, pets, or partners who can't find their phone or keys. This is what we do, and it's normalized, so it is okay. So with that, finally, I am Krischanna Roberson. I'm going to give you the quick and dirty Cliff Notes version of me. My name is pronounced Krischanna. I cuss and I speak fluent sarcasm. I lead with love, grace, and humility, and I believe in holding myself and others in loving accountability. This term that I got from a great colleague named Christine Saxman, and loving accountability is this balance between love and justice, meaning I can love you and me. We can have some conversations, but if you do something that rubs me the wrong way, or I do something that rubs you the wrong way, you're able to hold me accountable to that. So I'm a firm believer in loving accountability. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Any New Yorkers or Brooklynites in the house, please give me a thumbs up. I have lived a lot of places, New York, where I grew up, North Carolina, Washington, Virginia, and I currently reside in Alpharetta, Georgia. I am known for my macaroni and cheese and ooey gooey cake. So if I have any other chefs who make these dishes, let's talk after. We'll have a chopped battle and see how this goes down. I got some degrees. I've worked a lot of places. I've got a lot of experience. These are some of the places I've worked, and it is this balance across business and education that has allowed me to do some things that I liked, loved, and didn't. When I was a politician, I didn't like that. My sarcasm and cussing did not allow me to function well in those spaces. So I tried it and decided I don't want to do that ever again. I currently have my own company, and these two amazing folks that are on the screen are my reason why Collaborate exists. My son, Adonis, who's going to be 26 years old on Saturday, and my daughter, Alyssa, who's going to be 25 in November. Their experience in school, being in predominantly white spaces, caused me to really get involved as a parent and create culturally relevant learning and teaching, providing experiences for them that allowed Collaborate to be born, and building racial consciousness and collaboration with all kinds of folks. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm here with you today. And I want us to kind of get grounded in what we're thinking about in regards to culturally relevant teaching and learning. And I believe everyone brings a certain level of brilliance to every space that I am in, and it is an opportunity to share and learn from everyone's brilliance. So you will see on page 3 in your guide that there's some space for reflection. I will go ahead and drop that link again. If you do not have it, please let me know in the chat and I will put the link in the chat. But I'd like you to just reflect on these 2 questions. How do you personally define culturally relevant teaching and learning? Are you using it? If so, how? Take a moment to write, reflect. Go ahead and pop your cameras off so I can get a sense on where folks are. I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, I'm gonna ask folks to come on back and turn on your cameras if you are able. And what I'd like to do is just hear from about two folks. If you could just share your name and response, just go ahead and use that hand raise, and I can call on you to share whatever brilliant surfaced as you responded to those two questions. Lucy.
All right, took me a moment to find the raise hand. It's under the reactions. So first off, I'm not a teacher, so this is a little bit indirect, but I guess I would define it as recognizing and honoring the cultural and environmental differences that folks bring into their learning, and helping to expand awareness so that of cultures that people may not be aware of. And while I'm not a teacher, that is certainly part of what Galileo does, is to try and present different cultural concerns to the Galileo community as a whole.
You bring up a good point, Lucy, because you don't necessarily have to be a teacher in order to create spaces that are culturally relevant for teaching and for learning. We all work in organizations. We have colleagues and staff and ways that we can also think about it as well. So thank you for sharing. Any others that would like to lend their voice to and brilliance to the space? I will also invite that if you have some thoughts, but you don't necessarily want to say them out loud, please share in the chat as well. So, culturally relevant teaching and learning, it is for everyone. And it is not a quick fix or a simple strategy to use for the month of February or to sprinkle here and there into lessons. Every person in your learning spaces, whether they are a child or an adult, brings their culture, and recognizing that white culture is often normalized and accepted, there's so much more available right in your spaces that can enrich a learning environment. This lovely woman right here is Dr. Geneva Gay, and she is a prominent researcher and author in this space of culturally relevant teaching and learning. She believes, just like I do, that all students perform better on multiple measures of achievement when teaching is filtered through their own cultural experience. And the people that have that ability to bring this to fruition are educators, because while caring about conveys feelings of concern for one's state of being, caring for is active engagement in doing something to positively affect it. And that's what we're going to look at today, how you can begin to positively affect the spaces you have the opportunity to educate in. Make sense so far? All right. So give me a thumbs up if you are familiar with the Civil Rights Digital Library. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up as I'm scrolling through the pages here. Awesome, that is good. Well, I am going to show you a little bit about how we can get into this and look at content that can help us in building learning and ideas for curriculum for culturally relevant teaching and learning. So hopefully technology will let me be great and let me share my screen. If everybody can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Awesome. All right. So this is the main page of the screen. And as you can see, it's chock full of resources that you can click on. Educator resources, topics, places, but one of my quick and dirty places that I like to go to get just basic information is the new Georgia Encyclopedia. And I apologize, I'm looking at different screens, so that's why I'm not facing you. And why I like this, because if I'm thinking of something and I don't necessarily have a full idea on what it is, or perhaps I need to learn more about something, this is really a good place to start for me. And what I'd like y'all to do is also pull it up as well. I'm going to go ahead and plug the link into the chat where I am, but it's also in your study guide. And I want you to think about something that you want to learn more about. Currently, I'm working with some students for freedom riders. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, really look at what I need to look at while we're talking about it. So if I'm in the New Georgia Encyclopedia and I just type in freedom riders, and it always takes a minute to load, so be patient with it. I see Freedom Rides first popped up, and it gives me this lovely little summary on what this is, who it is. And here's where my interest became sparked. Looking at this map, I immediately thought, I can create some good stuff for the students that I know who currently who were from West Virginia and Louisiana and Georgia. So it kind of gives you this idea of, okay, I can create something, but here's the basis, right? Now, what I want you to do, you should have picked a topic or something that you were interested in. I need you to put a pin in it for a minute. Whatever that topic was, because we're going to come back to it later. So whether you utilize the New Georgia Encyclopedia or you decided to go into the other topics that's available, the places, the people, freedom or film, you have a slew of resources, whether you need video, you have students that you know are more visually motivated. This space is so chock full of information that it can really help you in creating some good stuff. So we have our pin. We have our idea of what we're going to talk about. Now we're going to hold it a minute to get introduced to some stuff. Everybody still with me? All right. So when we talk about culturally relevant teaching and learning, and through the work of Dr. Gay, there has been so many other amazing authors and researchers who've been trying to look at the intersectionality of culture, race, gender, and all those other isms that exist. And one of the books that I used often with educators is a book called Street Data that was written by Shane Saphir, which is what I'm referenced here. And what I am going to be referencing as we look at the art of social justice teaching. Now, this particular model comes out of the June Jordan School for Equity in San Francisco, California. And Shane Saphir uses this model as he gets folks to consider deepening our practices for instruction and engagement. So I'm going to move quickly through these 6 aspects that are going to help us gain a connection and some understanding on culturally relevant teaching and learning. Now, at the center is the art of social justice teacher, meaning that you need to engage these 6 aspects, that action, in order to bring it to fruition. The first aspect, can I make it bigger? It's also in your handout, I believe. Let me see if it's in there. I think I'll put it in there. Yes, I did on page 5. If you need to see it close up, it is also on page 5 in the handout. If you're having difficulty, as long as make sure that you have me on speaker view too. If you go to view up at the top and you have the option of speaker, gallery, or full screen, make sure you have me on speaker view. Is everyone having issues not seeing the slides?
I can't, you mean the slides off that are, I can see the slide.
Oh, okay, Laura Carter is having some issues. She can't see them.
So I'm seeing that you're sharing your browser, Krischanna, and that's taking up the bulk of the screen, and then slides are off to the right. Okay, there you go.
Okay, there you go. Thank you for helping me, Lucy. I appreciate that. Okay, is that better now? Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I forgot to turn off screen share. Great. Okay, so as you can see, that art of social justice teaching is where we want to get to, which is the center. But these 6 aspects begin first with the first one, which is we have to first develop students as human beings first. We need a world filled with warm demanders, right? That's that first aspect, seeing them as human beings first. The next aspect is creating a safe classroom community. And this means that you're recognizing and speaking to all that's happening in the world while creating and setting clear, honest expectations, practicing mindfulness, and teaching students that authenticity and vulnerability are vital. And they see that because we, as the educators, are modeling that. The third aspect that's over here in this peachy color is seeing students as intellectuals. And it means you want to be able to encourage students to have this warrior scholar attitude, meaning that they're always constantly questioning, you know, that awful word of why that they continually ask all the time. That's what we want. We want them to keep asking why. We want them to also see that their students, as well as themselves, are also a resource. And big ideas and thinking out of the box are encouraged. The idea that less is more. That's how we see students as intellectuals. The fourth aspect is this light blue one down here. And it's considering yourself as a coach. And I know sometimes that's a little bit difficult because there's so much that we have to manage when we're in learning spaces, but it's more about letting your students do the work and allowing room for your students to lead and show you what they know through what you've already facilitated for them in their learning. Then we have knowledge of students, this kind of slate blue color here. And it's about thinking about what your students bring to the space, believing and enforcing that they are exactly where they need to be and not where you want them to be, or not where a test tells them they need to be, but seeing them where they are in the moment is just fine. And finally, the 6th aspect is this pink here, the social justice curriculum. It means that you're providing knowledge that helps students understand the real world. They understand that why behind what matters. They see themselves in the curriculum. They see themselves in cross-cultural learning spaces with others who are like them and others who are not. Critical thinking is centered, but most importantly, the human values of justice and dignity and the cultural strengths that each student brings to the learning space is how you center it. And it's not about, oh, we have to wait to talk about Black history. Where can this happen in all aspects of curriculum, whether it be math, science, human resources, all of that? Doing this action, these actions, is what culturally relevant teaching and learning will feel like. Make sense? So, what's the connection between this model of social justice, the art of social justice teaching, and culturally relevant teaching and learning? What's some of the things that kind of popped into your brain as I went through that? And go ahead and just raise your hand to lend your voice to the space. Mary Roots. Peggy Felder.
Yes, hello. I would say that what really stood out to me is basically seeing themselves, the strength of their culture, and just seeing themselves as a person, just as you had mentioned earlier. That's just it, just really seeing themselves in the world, not the world seeing them in another light, but just actually ensuring that they belong, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was thinking, I'm sorry, I had the mute on, but I think, do you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear
we
me?
hear you. This is
Yeah.
Mary Roots
Yes.
speaking?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking that everyone has something to bring to the table for whatever it is. Everyone has something to contribute. That's just what I thought.
Everyone does have something to contribute, right? Early on, it's this idea, and I talked to a lot of folks where they mention this idea, oh, well, you know, we do multicultural night, or we do a Black history something, or we celebrate Cinco de Mayo, or something along those lines, seeing it as through this tiny little scope versus what are the folks around you? How do they understand that? And how can they lend themselves, being able to just kind of show up and see that I am valued, is sometimes is a difficult part for folks when it's not normalized in a way that we would like it to be normalized. So when you see the idea of thinking to create the space of social justice, all of these aspects of thinking about the knowledge, of thinking about classroom safety, thinking about how do I know these students, taking a couple of steps back and going, oh, letting them lead is challenging because educators got a lot on their plate. And in addition to that, we have to be able to pause, see how the world is changing and how education and how we look at education can be changed. And if we can't wait on states and governors and politicians to do that, because we see what's happening with gun laws. So it's really up to us to be able to make these moves to create these spaces for our students. I want to introduce you. So if we look at the art of social justice teaching and culturally relevant teaching and learning. Before we put this together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I want to lay on a little bit more research and tools. So one of the things I often use is the Danielson framework for teaching, and it was developed by Charlotte Danielson. And it's this tool to identify the aspects of a teacher's responsibilities that have been documented through research. And it's a way to promote and improve student learning. And it outlines some 22 components and 76 elements organized into 4 domains for teaching responsibility. Now, as an educator, you know, we love us some acronyms, and because that's a lot to remember, I summarize it. I summarize the good stuff with Danielson by using the 4 R's, which is rigor, relevance, relationships, and results. So let's get into it. So I switch them up in the ways that are most important. And what we were talking about a moment ago is the relationships, right? The relationships is all about the classroom environment. The communication with students. In order to do that, you have to have relationships with them. That's what builds trust, and we can't do anything else if we don't center and value relationships with students. We're gonna have to take the time to know who's around us. And as Lucy reminded us when we first hopped on, that it's not just about the classroom environment. This is also within your organizations as well, right? Building relationships and understanding what folks need to show up in their full self. Next one is relevance, and this is within their in Danielson's first domain, and it's really about planning and preparation. So we plan and we prep content for students. The relevance lives within the environments. If you're planning and prepping and you realize that you got 2 students in your class that, oh, maybe I have Kayla, who's from Ecuador, and I got Shayla, who's from Nigeria. How can I create something within the dynamic of what I have to teach that allows me to embrace and learn something from these 2 as well? So the relevance means that those 2 students will see themselves. This is relevant to my learning, and I want to learn. The third one is rigor. And this is in the third domain, and this is in the domain of instruction. And it is where rigor lives. And we got to remember, with rigor, the goal is helping students develop the capacity to understand content that's complex, ambiguous, provocative, while being personally and emotionally challenging. You can't have rigor without relationships and relevance, because if you want to get personal, want your students to be emotional, then you got to be able to look at, wow, does rigor mean that my outline is preparing them for a test, and if they get a good mark on the test, it's good? Or does rigor mean I can push each student knowing where they are and not where I want them to be in different places at different times? Y'all with me so far still? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods, good. All right, now I did want to put y'all into some small groups, because just like I often with large groups, folks don't like to talk out loud, but instead what I'm going to turn this into is some reflection. You will see on page 7, and I'm going to share my screen, I created a little table to kind of help us put this together. Let me share my screen again for those. Everybody can see the table that's in the handout, okay? Awesome. So what I want you to begin thinking of is that at the top, I have relationships, R1, rigor, R2, and relevance, R3. And then along the line, I have the 6 aspects of social justice teaching. And I have a question in each one that's related to various models of Danielson, whether it be relationships, rigor, or relevance. And remember, we put that pin in that topic you wanted to use earlier. I want you to consider that topic when you think about social justice curriculum and an aspect or a learning opportunity that you may have where you can fold that topic into current events, literature, facts that are relevant in the world that we live in today. So what I want you to do is take a couple of moments and just reflect. How am I understanding this connection between culturally relevant teaching and learning and social, the 6 aspects of social justice pedagogy? And where with some of these questions is an opportunity for me to dig deeper into my own instructional practices or curriculum development, whether you're doing it for students or adults. And take a couple of minutes to just reflect, and then I'm going to open it up, and then I'm going to just call on folks if folks don't raise their hand, just like teachers do when we're in the classroom. Make sense? All right, I'll give you a few minutes to self-reflect. Okay, so let's make it make sense. What are some of the thoughts that surface? Some of maybe your response to one of the questions that was on page 7? Other insight that you want to share when we think about this lovely sandwich of culturally relevant teaching and learning, rigor, relationships, and relevance, and social justice teaching? Go ahead and put a hand, raise your hand using the reactions down at the bottom to lend your voice to the space. Lucy.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in because I probably did this wrong. And if I did it wrong, then maybe other people won't feel so embarrassed to jump in as well. But the topic that I had was looking up in the new Georgia Encyclopedia was around the film industry in Georgia. So again, I'm not a teacher, but I was, thinking about how if we were, studying that in a classroom, perhaps I would ask, students to think about, films that they had seen that they felt especially connected to. I would maybe look to, some of the, things like Tyler Perry and his studio, which is in Georgia, or the fact that the, Black Panther movies were here, or, Atlanta, to, show students that there are, at least African-American students, that they are being sort of represented in the film history in Georgia, and ask them to kind of talk through that experience. Does it feel relevant to them? Does it reflect their lives? Those kind of things is where I was going. And there's a lot on this sheet, so that's about as far as I got.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lot to think about when we're thinking about these things. And I also see, Lucy, the question that you place, how to navigate culturally relevant teaching and learning given the current concerns about critical race theory, teaching of divisive topics. Well, we have to consider perspectives in those who believe that us having honest conversations about something as important as race isn't divisive, because we're still seeing Buffalo hasn't been a month yet, right? That these ideas that, in all honesty, we're always, the misconception around what critical race theory is always challenging, because people believe it's this curriculum. It's not. It's just another framework. I have mentioned Geneva Gay, Charlotte Danielson. They all created different frameworks in which we use to analyze culturally relevant teaching and learning, how teachers' responsibility in the classroom and out. And it's not such about the idea that it's a divisive topic. It's about a topic that we need to talk about, because we don't. That's why it's all of these misconceptions. And as a Black woman doing this work, when folks say it's divisive, it's because systems want to stay the way that they are, right? I don't want to think about educating the students who live in the achievement debt. I don't want to think about having to do things such as developing a Crown Act because my hair is unacceptable in the workplace. We can work this both sides, whether it's an education or an organization. So it's not about how, it's just about whether or not we have the courageousness to be able to say, I'm going to do it. How do you run with both scissors in your hand and then ask for an apology later? This is what I often ask folks to do. Rewrite the history books. That's yeah, because what's the history that we get? Whether we're looking at the Mexican Repatriation Act, whether we're looking at Black history, Japanese history, the internment camps, I mean, all of this, right? But where's the Harlem Renaissance, right? Where are the contributions that folks have made? So how do we look at creating these learning spaces where I can rely on the students in my space to help guide? And not just, again, this isn't just for teaching Black history to Black students. More importantly, our white students, our Italian students, our Japanese, all students need to kind of understand that we live in a world that's normalized one way. But in order to be able to see you and hear you, it has to be us that, okay, we're going to chop up what we have and kind of develop something different by just being a little courageous and saying that I'm going to do it. And I'm going to push myself to have difficult conversations by using the same question that our kids ask us, whether they're your personal kids, your aunts, your nephews, your nieces. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you believe that? Can you tell me a little bit more about why you think that? Can you tell me a little bit about where you got that information from? I love that one in particularly. But I developed this kind of like cheat sheet chart for you to reflect on the spaces that I'm in, whether you are in a classroom or whether you're in an organization and you're looking to create learning and development opportunities for staff. How can I do that? So the idea of the questioning is to begin with yourself first. What do you also have the capacity to do and change within the spaces that you are in? In addition to this great resource of the Civil Rights Digital Library. The videos that are on there, you can get lost in there for hours, and then you go ahead and pair that and make it Googleable. I don't know if that's a word, but I use it often to find out a little bit more information and really build and create things that haven't been done. Because yes, history is good with Rosa King and Malcolm X, but there's so much more out there. Oh, thank you. It is a word. All right. I want to make sure I spend a little bit of time opening up any questions in addition to the one Lucy had. Are there any questions or thoughts that you want to lend to the space?
Hey, this is Joy. There is one thing that I mentioned earlier regarding the ability of teachers to, I mean, we know that they're multifaceted. They can, teach all sorts of things, but my mom is a teacher and I often hear that it's just one more thing that they got to do, one more thing that they have to do, one more thing, that they have to put on the list, figure out how to integrate, they got to do this, they got to give people lunch money, and so finding ways that this doesn't become one more thing, how to make it sort of more second nature than, oh my God, I got to do a whole research project to figure out how to talk to this student from, an indigenous nation.
It's a good point. One of the things that I learned early on when I was a teacher is that we'll spend a summer after we have binged on the beach and regrouped from the previous year and let the wine go, is that you prepare. Okay, I'm going in first day of class. I got everything done. I got my lessons. I got my assessments. I got all of this stuff done. And my biggest step in it was when I got to class and 98% of my class spoke a different language. My English written assessment won't go and work. So I had to switch in the middle. And it was at that point that, wow, okay, I got to do something different. So when you mentioned, Joy, setting the tone, my first 2 weeks with students is all about that relationship piece. So I have activities where here's what I know, here's where you are, tell me about this, tell me about that. I won't get into the curriculum, and I rewrite what needs to be done based on who I have in my space. And that goes not even when I was just in the classroom, but what I do when I teach organizations. I do an assessment. Where are you? What language do you speak? What do you know? What can you bring here? How can you share within the space? And even though it takes more time, I just changed my instructional practices to align with what I believe can make a difference for a student at any age and at any level. And that was, I can't do anything with them if I don't know them. I just can't. And if I spent 3 of my hours creating this wonderful assessment with my lovely rubrics and ways to assess, who's that helping? It's about decentering my own comfort as adult and centering the students' comfort in it. And a lot of times that's hard for adults because we're jam-packed. So when that happens, often with educators, I'll ask, whose comfort are you centering and why? How can you recreate? How can you do something a little bit different in the ways that are going to be beneficial to the student versus the easiness of yourself? So I know that was a big answer, but it's just that challenging the system, challenging how you move within the system automatically is what I would offer.
Thank you.
And with that, we are a minute over, but I want to thank you so very much for being with me. If you want to learn more about me and collaborate and what I do, please feel free to scan that code. Hopefully technology will let you be great and it works. If not, it is also on the last page of your handout, along with all of the resources that I mentioned, in case you want to do some more work and work through those questions. Thank you for rolling with me this afternoon and hope you have a phenomenal rest of the conference. And if anything surfaces, please feel free to reach out to me. I am now a resource to you. So I thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really informative and always definitely great to hear different perspectives and how to integrate those into classrooms. So the presentation will be available, the recording, on Friday if you all want to review it or send it to your colleagues. And as Krischanna mentioned, the presentation slides are also available. They're on Sketch, but they're also linked in the chat. So thank you all so much and have a good afternoon. Bye.